Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Skura, also known as Islands in Front, and today we'll be delving into a topic that's so important and I've been asked about so many times you couldn't count, genuinely. And so today I present to you the ultimate guide to mono blue fey removal, okay? We'll touch on temporary removal, conditional removal, permanent removal, so all the enchantments that you might see. So yes, we'll talk about Bind the Monster, Unable to Scream, but also Snap and Gutshot. Now, a couple of things. First of all, the goal of this presentation, because of course it's a PowerPoint banger, is not to tell you what's the best. I will tell you at the end in a tier list what is the best to me currently, and this is my position. But as time progresses, in a year or 2 years, the pool of removal might just change. And I want the ideas here to be still present for you and for me to assess cards that come in the future, okay? So while I will give you my current position on what's the best removal, the overarching goal is the ability to assess any other future removal that comes out. So what's the goal of removal in the Fey deck, right? Because it's different for different decks, genuinely. Now, you have probably seen my video on Fey misconceptions, and there I delved into the fact that Fey is not an aggro deck. It doesn't operate on 2 lands. It doesn't close games fast. It's a mid to late game strategy, even though it puts a stranglehold on the opponent from the very beginning. And it all ties back to how it plays. For example, Terra has a 5/5, attacks, opponent can chump block, but the Terra outsizes almost anything the opponent will put on the board. It's not like that for Fey. So what are the goals? Connect with your creatures, right? Do it in such a way that you can connect with your creatures. In most cases, it just means remove a blocker, so tap a creature. Disable opposing creatures from attacking or using abilities, right? So it doesn't have to be the same as the first point. For example, Unable to Scream turns off abilities, right? So it shuts them off this way. Work with the dynamics of the Fey deck. I've already mentioned that. So it needs to facilitate our main plan, which is attacking, getting in, dealing damage with ninjas. Answers problems we actually have. And that's like a kind of like a cheeky point. But the thing is that people very often think that something is cool or is a good card in the vacuum, but actually doesn't really work with what we need to accomplish, or it deals with stuff we don't need to deal with. For example, with some tier 5 strategy or something we are good against anyways. Typically, you want a card to be flexible game 1, and this, so you play some cards because they're flexible for game 1, and you play more narrow and precise answers in the sideboard. And very importantly, it has to be reliable. So be as individually powerful as possible. It needs to get the job done, right? So if I play removal because I want to remove blockers, it does it, right? It actually accomplishes it. And this theme is going to come back a couple of times. From my personal perspective, the most, of course, answer problems we actually have is important, but connect with the creatures is really important. It has to be reliable, and these would be the 2 biggest ones. And then it baked in that it has to work with the dynamics of the deck. By which I mean, the second point, disabling their creatures from doing what they are supposed to do, is least important, right? Our removal is kind of proactive, or it's played to facilitate our proactive plan, not to thwart their plan, typically. And that's a huge distinction, okay? We don't want them to stop them from doing their thing, but we want to stop them because it stops us. Okay, we are a proactive deck. With that out of the way, which was quite a bit of introduction, but it actually lays the groundwork so we can go through all the other cards. So, creatures. The first one is Mistblade Shinobi. So, Mistblade Shinobi, when it connects, it returns a creature to their owner's hand. It costs a single blue, so it looks decent. However, it has some fundamental problems. And again, we can refer back to our sheet. And let's just do it very quickly. Does it help you connect with your creatures? It doesn't. because you're going to have this effect only once you've connected, right? So it's kind of better when you're already doing your thing, right? So it doesn't really accomplish that. It also takes that's the big thing. Is it reliable? Not really. It's a 3-mana creature, which again doesn't really work because if you're hardcasting it, it's never connecting. It's a 1/1. It doesn't block. It doesn't attack. So it's a very unreliable creature that doesn't actually solve the thing we want to solve for. Harrier Strix, on the other hand, is the opposite. It always does what it's supposed to do. No questions asked. Boom, tap, right? It works with our inherent plan because it's a 1-drop that flies, right? It does tab blockers, right? So that's like one of the perfect kind of soft. Okay, when I say removal, I'm actually today going to talk about all of those, all of kind of creature interactions. And so this fits the bill. Then we have Snare Master Sprite, which does tap, yes. Works with the inherent plan of Fae. It is a Fae, it's a 1-drop, it flies, awesome. It's not as reliable or efficient because it actually, this card asks you for kind of specific conditions, while Harrier Strix doesn't, right? So huge difference already here. But it's still decent. It's still decent, and again, the fact that it works inherently with our plan is a huge plus, right? So again, these are the metrics we have to use. Spell conditional removal. Okay. Sleep of the Dead. What do we think of Sleep of the Dead? A very popular and very, very powerful card for Terra, right? So maybe in a Fae. And so this is the question. Truth is that Sleep of the Dead is just not a good Fae card for a couple of reasons. So, okay, so let's go through the list. Is it reliable? Well, not really, right? Because the creature will be able to block from the next turn, right? You can say, okay, but it works in Terra. Yes, but Terra attacks in chunks of 5 or 10, not 1 and 2. That's a huge difference, right? It's a different deck. Terra can actually use the escape mechanic very, very well. Fae just straight up can't, right? It just can't. So it just doesn't really work with what we really want to accomplish, okay? Piracy Charm is another one, and it's very much conditional. So again, it's not reliable. Of course, everything in this category won't be reliable because it's a conditional removal. But it gives +2/-1 to a creature, right? So basically the question is, when is it better than a gut shot? Because that's the same thing almost, right? And so of course it would mean that you facilitate one of the other two modes, which is unblockable against island decks, and then the discard. But as a Fae player, you don't want to use a card and 1 mana to make them discard a card, because it's just very inefficient. And also, you don't really need Island Walk against island decks, because these are High Tide where you're attacking anyways, or Terra, where you just fly over. Now, you could just grunt once like a ninja connection. Sure, but then you use the card to draw a card. Basically, it's 1 mana to damage, which is not what you want. So it's pretty unreliable. And speaking of gut shot, this will be very meta dependent because it's going to be good against X1 creatures, but then it's fine in the mirror match. Okay, sure. It's good against elves, but elves are such a bad matchup that making it from a completely unwinnable matchup to unwinnable is barely an improvement. So, but again, this is a card that's kind of conditional, but there are situations where it could be really good. Possibly. Mutagenic Growth is another one I put in here because it's kind of removal. You want to play it when it acts as a mental misstep against, for example, Lightning Bolt, or maybe like Shock variants. But it's going to come up when you want to play into Core Skyfisher, for example, and you expect the opponent to block, and you go, boop, basically a removal. Now, it doesn't allow you to connect, right? It removes after. It's not reliable because it requires you to have a creature, contrary to, for example, enchantment removal, where you just go, bam, pass, for example, right? And temporarily disable their attacking. So it is very efficient, which definitely speaks to its power. Like, 1 mana this is where we start at. This is our expectation. 2 mana is almost unplayable. 0 mana, let's talk, because 0 mana is very tempting, right? Resculpt, or these types of effects, I've been asked about those. Exile a creature and then they create a 4/4. First of all, it's 2 mana, so that's already a big no-no to me. But in theory, you could, for example, exile Chrysalis, and they get a non-reach 4/4. And then you can snap that 4/4 and they're left with nothing. But this comes back to, again, to those metrics. So does it remove a blocker? It literally doesn't, right? Again, except for specifically reach creatures for flyers. But doesn't help with the ninjas, and this is where the man is at. You want to connect with ninjas. Is it reliable? Well, not really, because you ask yourself to be able to then snap that creature, which is also basically 2/4 running yourself, because you need to resculpt and snap to get rid of a single creature. So it's not so it doesn't remove a blocker, isn't really reliable. I don't like that. There was also an argument to use it for your own creatures in response to removal. So it gives it a bit more flexibility. But again, we can still come back to the fact that it's 2 mana, and the fact that a 4/4 creature doesn't really work great with ninjas. So it doesn't work with the inherent plan. Temporary removal. Vapor Snack has been mentioned quite a few times. Vapor Snack is okay. Oh, let's just say okay. It is 1 mana. It does remove a blocker. It could be used as a protection for your own creature at 1 mana. That's okay. But the question is, do we need such effects, or whether we have something better or not? And I think we do. But this is defensible. This is decent, right? Because it checks a couple of boxes from what we have. Now, of course, it casts disadvantage, as every temporary removal spell in this category is going to be. Then we have Snap, which is also kind of does the same thing. It also returns a creature. It's also temporary. It can also save your creature. But, crucially, it is basically 0 mana. And as you can imagine, that's huge. Now, it is 2 upfront, so it's not pure upside, because you need to have 2 mana in the first place. It's worse against like spell pierce. When it doesn't resolve, you don't get the mana back. But it's in most cases going to just be better Vapor Snack, unless you play like 4 snaps already and you want like a 5th effect of that sort. Okay. Curfew has also been mentioned, and let's take a look at a couple of things. Does it remove a blocker? Okay, it does. Is it reliable? It's not reliable, right? Because each player chooses, so they will choose. So it's not reliable, right? It fails this category. Does it work with our plan? And some people will say yes, because you can replay Fairy Seer, or replay Spellstutter, or replay a Ninja, which is kind of true. But I think it's kind of backwards, because you don't want to kind of set yourself back. And it also ties back to reliability, right? I want to be able to choose if I want to bounce a creature or not. And here I have to do it, right? So if it was like Vapor Snack, but it says you may return a creature you control on top of that, okay, we could have a very nice conversation here. But because you have to, it's unreliable and kind of puts you in an awkward spot sometimes, especially in the early game, right? When you don't really want to set yourself back. It's particularly bad against all the spawns and the kind of random creatures into format. You don't want this, to bounce Refurbished Familiar, or like again a creature that they would benefit from replaying. They could also return a tapped creature, so it doesn't even remove a blocker. Now, let's get to the meat of this. Okay, permanent removal, and we will be tying back all the motifs again. Okay, just as a reminder: reliability. Tie with our plan, remove a blocker. These are the key things. And I will go through every iteration of this effect that I think I have found. Okay? Stasis field. Okay. And then, so immediately think if you've got the red flags. Okay, 2 mana. Huge red flag, okay? So probably out already. Enchanted creature has base, power, and toughness 02, has defender and lose abilities. Sounds awfully familiar to Unable to Scream, right? So basically 2 mana, Unable to Scream. 2 mana, bad. You have to ask yourself, can this creature block? Yes, it can. loses points. 2 mana, can block, out. Okay? Losing abilities is cool, and having defender is cool for that second point in the matrix, right? So making them unable to do something to you. But realistically, for Fae, tapped is as good as dead, right? The difference is like Crypt Rats, but you wouldn't side in removal for a Crypt Rats deck, which is like Gardens, right? It's good against Murmuring Mystic, but this is where the list ends. So it's unless, of course, your local meta has numerous creatures that have specifically abilities that are relevant. So 2 mana, can block, out. Okay, Bubble Snare, 1 mana. Okay, let's have a conversation. When it enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, tap, doesn't untap. Okay, so if we wanted to fulfill the primary goal of tapping, it costs 4 mana. Out. Weakstone Subjugation. When it enters, you may pay 3. If you do tap, so 4 mana for tappage. Out. But okay, hold on. There is a unique upside. You can enchant artifacts. So, for example, artifact lands, right? So, in theory, your opponent could go tap, land, pass, and you go creature, subjugation, your land, pass, right? That's cool. But the issue is that this is upside on a card that doesn't do the primary thing well. It's not reliable, right? The opponent plays Chrysalis, and you go 4 mana removal, I guess. That's not something you can afford. And also, you pay 4 mana, they pyroblast it. Yikes. Very bad, inefficient exchange. Winter's Rest. 2 mana. Out. Okay? The rest is basically what we want. The rest is exactly what we want. Tap creature, doesn't untap. Perfect. 2 mana. Unfortunately, that's a pass. But close. Except for the mana, it does what we want to do. Witness Protection. 1 mana. Let's read on. Creature loses abilities. Cool. And is a white and green citizen with base power and toughness 1/1. Yikes. Can it block? Yes, it can. And not only can it block, it could actually trade. Can you imagine attaching Witness Protection and you then have to trade with your hacker? Yikes. That's just huge no-no. Curse of Chains. 2 mana, out. At the beginning of each upkeep, tap enchanted creature, right? So in theory, it stays permanently tapped, kind of. But when you attach it for the first time, it stays as it was. So it doesn't remove a blocker. Pass. Watery Grasp. Okay, we're getting into the spicy category. Because this is from an upcoming set, Avatar, right? 1 mana. Enchanted creature doesn't untap. Good. Waterbend. Shuffle it into the deck for 5 mana, or you can tap to pay for it. No. Because first of all, it doesn't remove a blocker, so it doesn't tap it in the first place. But second of all, if you want to shuffle it back to make it a proper removal, you have to either pay a ton or tap the creatures, but you want to attack with your creatures, not tap them not to attack. So it doesn't work with the inherent plan. Also on midway, but again, you would have to tap your creatures that would otherwise attack. Ringing Strike Mastery is another one I've heard a lot. 1 mana. Okay, awesome. Tap enchanted creature. Banger. It doesn't untap. Ooh, okay. And then 5 mana untap these creatures, which is what the opponent can do. Okay. So we remove a blocker. That's awesome. It's efficient. That's good. They can't block with it. Good. So maybe this is the removal we should play. How much is 5 mana? And I heard here the argument 5 mana is so much. Against Fae, you cannot pay 5 mana. Like, you can't afford it. Yes and no. For as long as one of the main creatures you want to remove in the format is Writhing Chrysalis, which makes spawns and then produces a mana, and one of the main decks plays Wildfire that ramps them, I think this is an actual downside. And then the moment they untap it, it's just so bad for you. And as I mentioned at the very beginning in my misconceptions video, this is a deck that does not close games fast or early. It's a mid to late game strategy. They will get to that 5 mana. So it fails in the reliability category, unfortunately, right? Now you can say, okay, what if it was 6 or 7 or 8? And if we have this thought exercise, it's very likely that at some point there is a number that it's good enough. I'm not sure what that number is for now, but because Chrysalis is 4 mana, it makes spawns, and they can perfectly on curve just untap it next turn. That doesn't work. So either Chrysalis goes, and there isn't that much mana floating around, and maybe this becomes more playable, or maybe the bar is higher at like 7 or 8. Fan favorite. Unable to scream. 1 mana. Good. Creature loses all the abilities. Good. It's an 0-2 untapped. Pass. Okay? So, I know that it removes any abilities, right? So again, Murmuring Mystic, Crypt Rats, and the stuff we talked about, right? Tireless Tribe or whatnot. But the thing is that again, in matchups where you want to break through, you don't. Think of it as kind of implicit card disadvantage. If you have Ninja on board and you go, okay, unable on your Cryptic Serpent, and then they say, okay, I guess I'll block, I might as well block, then you have lost a card you would have drawn with that Ninja if you actually tapped it, right? So you kind of 2-for-1 yourself, in a way, and 2 damage, right? If you think of it this way, it becomes much worse, right? And to add to this, creature loses abilities, but it doesn't mean it's like an empty piece of cardboard. If you try to play Unable to Scream on the Chrysalis, they can just pop spawns in response, it gets counters, and counters stay there. So it's, for example, a 1-3 or a 2-4, which is exactly what you want to avoid. Your Ninja will never connect if they have a 1-3 or 2-4. So you played removal, which hasn't accomplished anything, right? So then you can say, okay, maybe this is not a card for Chrysalis. But then I will say, why waste a removal slot for a removal that doesn't remove Chrysalis, right? Again, in the current environment, when Chrysalis is so important, I don't think you can afford that. So not only does it retain the counters for one of the biggest threats, Chrysalis, you also have to deal with the fact that this creature can block, and so again, it's implicit card advantage for the opponent, right? So for me, it's a huge pass. Huge pass. Cryo Shatter, one of the newer ones, and I've got asked about this a lot. Okay, so cheap, yes. -5, -0, so basically it doesn't kill your creatures. Okay. When it becomes tapped or is dealt damage, destroy it. So people have said that it's basically hard removal, because when they want to, if they wanted to attack, it will die. And if they block and they will deal no damage because it's -5, it will die, right? So it's basically actual removal, like actually it dies. And then I come back to one of my quotes. Tapped is as good as dead. It doesn't matter if it's actually dead in the graveyard. If it doesn't block, it's fine. It's dead to me, right? Because this allows the opponent to block. And again, it's the same thing like with Unable to Scream. If you allow them to block a ninja, you lose a card you would have drawn, right? And then you remove that creature, but what's the deal, right? It is upside, because if it's in the graveyard, they cannot play Eviscerator's Insight on it, right? If it dies, they cannot use the ability if it's, let's say, Murmuring Mystic, right? But then again, if it's Murmuring Mystic, they just won't block. They will just say, sure, and they will keep using the ability. So there was another argument, which is that Cryo Shatter can combine like a combo with Harrier Strix. So you can, for example, play them in the main deck even, both. And then you can say Cryo Shatter on something, bam, Strix, tap, kill it, attack in. But then it fails the reliability metric, because now you need to combine 2 cards to remove a blocker. Why would you do it if you can just combine 1, right? Because sure, you can tap a cryo-shattered creature with Strix, but you might as well, let's say, bind the monster 1 and tap a different one with Strix and remove 2 blockers, not 1, right? And the last one is bind the monster. And this is the bee's knees. This is it. 1 mana, yes. Taps the creature, yes. Doesn't untap, yes. So it's basically the ringing bell strike, but it doesn't have the option to untap. So it's very reliable in this case. Now, it's not pure upside, and that's something I've been asked about a ton, because it says that you get dealt damage equal to a power, right? And because most of the creatures you want to remove are, as I mentioned, Chrysalis, but also like Tolarian Terror and Cryptic Serpent, is just deal 5 to you, or deal 7 to you, right? Isn't that bad? No, it's not. Now, of course, it's downside. Of course, it's downside. You don't want to lose 5 life if you don't have to lose 5 life. But my point is that you have to lose 5 life. Against decks where you race, when you want to be proactive, and you're on the offensive, right? So it's worth it. Now, not losing 5 life, but then allowing to block, like with, for example, Unable to Scream, is not something I want to do. You can think of it this way. What's worth more? Me losing 5 life, or them losing 2 and you draw a card? So if we make these 2 redundant, what's worth more? Me losing 3 life, or me drawing a card? And I think that's clear, right? I think that's clear. Me drawing a card is more important than losing that 3 life. Now, there will be games when it's very long, you race past each other, and you draw your 4th Bind the Monster against Tolarian Terror, and you just can't play it. That will happen. But again, we're entering these exception categories, exception situations, and every card will have some exception scenario. If we get a card printed that doesn't have this drawback, we're golden. But until then, I think Bind the Monster takes the cake. And Unable to Scream isn't even second, honestly. Now, honorable mention for the fans, Sigil of Sleep. Whenever enchanted creature deals damage to a player, return target creature to its owner's hand. So it's basically that ninja we mentioned previously. It is honorable mention because I'm not sure a lot of people know about its existence. But again, it has the same problems as that ninja had, so it's not really playable. So my tier list for now, just to summarize this in a more actionable way for today, this is the S tier list. Creature, highest tricks. Temporary removal, snap, hard removal, bind the monster. And I'm very confident about that. A tier is Snare Master Sprite as creature and Mutagenic as conditional removal. Kind of, in combat type of stuff. And there is nothing else. Nothing else matters. Like, why would I go even lower? Like, there is nothing to choose from, because you could realistically play Harrier Strix and Snare Master Sprite in the same deck, or Snap and Mutagenic, so that makes sense. But I don't see adding more of other effects. So this is it. Half an hour of completely breaking down in an ultimate guide how to assess all the removal. We can speed run back to the beginning, and I hope that now I have allowed you to assess any removal through the lens of mentioned in this video, primarily with the fact whether you can connect with your creatures and the blocker is tapped, whether it works with the dynamics of the deck, and it is reliable, because that's very, very important for this deck. Okay, thank you very much for watching. If you want more content, high-level content, and sideboard guides, you can visit my MetaFi down below. I have a guide for 30 matchups broken into hands you keep, videos inside, and a ton of other stuff. And yeah, please remember to hold my hand, and let's pass them together. And I will see you next time. Cheers. Boo.